The muted hum of energy converters was the only sound in the cramped living quarters that Ethan Blake called home. Outside, the relentless sun of Iridia baked the desert planet's surface, creating heat mirages that danced across the horizon. Inside, Ethan methodically cleaned the components of a microstabilizer, his hands moving with practiced precision. This was his routine had been for 4 years now. Fix broken energy station parts, stay invisible, survive. The Crimson Haven station was perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. Located deep in the Iridian desert, far from the artificially created oases, where most of the planet's population clustered, it served as both sanctuary and prison for a man with secrets. Ethan's quarters reflected his minimalist existence, a sleeping pod basic nutritional station workbench, cluttered with tools and salvaged parts, and a small collection of books, physical ones, the kind nobody bothered with anymore. One wall displayed a schematic of the station's energy grid, annotated with his cramped handwriting. The other walls were bare. He reached for his canteen, took a measured sip of recycled water, and checked the time. His shift wouldn't begin for another 3 hours. Plenty of time to finish repairs on this stabilizer and maybe even catch some sleep before facing another 12-hour stretch of maintaining the vital systems that kept Crimson Haven functioning. The communication panel on his wall buzzed unexpectedly. Strange. Nobody called him unless something was critically malfunctioning, and even then, they usually sent automated alerts, not direct communications. Wiping his hands on a rag, Ethan hesitated before answering. 4 years of hiding had made him cautious. Finally, he pressed the acceptance button. "Blake here. Engineer Blake," the station supervisor's voice sounded strained. "Your presence is requested at the trading port. Immediately. I'm off shift and I've got critical repairs." "This is not optional, Blake. There's been an incident. It involves you." The connection terminated before Ethan could ask for clarification. He stood motionless for a moment, mind racing through possibilities. Had they found him? Had his past finally caught up to him? Slipping a small pulse disruptor into his boot and securing his tool belt around his waist, Ethan left his quarters. The corridor outside was deserted, illuminated by the energy-efficient lighting that cast everything in a faint blue glow. He moved briskly, avoiding eye contact with the few station personnel he passed. The trading port was located on the western edge of the station, where visiting merchants and travelers could dock their ships and conduct business without entering the main facility. As Ethan approached, he noticed an unusual number of security personnel stationed around the entrance. Not station security. These were Iridian tribal enforcers, instantly recognizable by their red desert wraps and the energy lances they carried. Something was very wrong. The port's main hall was normally bustling with traders haggling over water rights, energy credits, and rare minerals. Today, it was eerily empty, except for a small gathering at the central table. The station supervisor, looking profoundly uncomfortable, stood beside the imposing figure of an Iridian elder. Seated at the table was an enormous alien, his gray-green skin marked with elaborate tattoos that snaked up his neck and across his shaved head. Ethan recognized the species immediately, Xerionite from the Outer Rim. Powerful militaristic culture, with a strict honor code. And this particular Xerionite wore the insignia of a high-ranking commander. As Ethan approached, the Xerionite turned bloodshot eyes toward him and gave a booming laugh that echoed through the empty hall. "Is this him? This scrawny human?" He slammed a massive fist on the table, causing glasses to jump. "This is who outplayed the great commander Xerion Ral." Ethan stopped in his tracks. "I've never met you before. There must be some mistake." The Iridian elder stepped forward, his wrinkled face grim beneath his ceremonial headdress. "There is no mistake, Ethan Blake. Last night you participated in a binding ritual with Commander Ral." "That's impossible. I was at my post all night." "No," the supervisor interjected. "Your biometric log shows you visited the station cantina at 2300 hours. You were there for approximately 45 minutes. Ethan frowned. Yes, he had stopped for a drink after his shift. The memory was hazy. He'd been exhausted after a double rotation, fixing a critical power coupling. He remembered sitting at the bar ordering a synthetic whiskey. "I had one drink, alone." The Zarianite commander let out another booming laugh. "Not alone. You sat next to me, human. I was celebrating my successful campaign against the Vorlan raiders. I offered you a drink from my personal flask, Zarianite blood wine. You accepted." A cold feeling settled in Ethan's stomach. He vaguely remembered a large, loud alien offering him something. He'd taken a polite sip, nothing more. The liquid had burned like fire going down, and after that, by accepting his drink, the elder continued, "You entered into a binding contract under Iridian tribal law. Commander Ral wagered his 3 daughters as collateral in your game of chance." "Game of chance? I didn't play any—" "You threw the dice," the commander interrupted, "and fortune abandoned me. 7 successive strikes, a statistical improbability." His massive fist hit the table again. "I lost everything." Ethan's mind raced. He had no memory of any dice game. The blood wine must have affected him more than he realized. "This has to be a misunderstanding. I don't want anyone's daughters." The elder's expression hardened. "What you want is irrelevant. The contract has been sealed according to the ancient laws that govern this planet. You are now the legal guardian of Commander Ral's 3 daughters." "And I'm leaving this dust ball," Ral growled. "My fleet departs in 1 hour. I've been reassigned to the Cygnus campaign 3 years minimum at the front lines. Can't very well take 3 royal daughters into battle, can I?" A cruel smile twisted his features. "Besides, they've become problematic. Perhaps you'll have better luck with them." Ethan looked between the 3 faces, the amused Zarianite, the stern elder, and his supervisor, who was clearly desperate to resolve the situation without incident. "This is absurd. I never agreed to this." "The blood wine ceremony is binding," the elder stated firmly. "To refuse would be to violate our most sacred laws. The penalty is death." The supervisor cleared his throat. "Ethan, please. Commander Ral's ship is waiting and his daughters have already been transported to your quarters. Just sign the guardianship papers and we can all move forward." "My quarters," Ethan's voice rose. "You let strangers into my private space without permission." "They are no longer strangers," the elder said. "They are your wards now." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't accept this insanity, but he also couldn't afford to make enemies of the Iridian Tribal Council. Their influence extended throughout the planet. If they declared him an outlaw, he'd have nowhere to hide. "What exactly does this guardianship entail?" he asked carefully. "You will provide shelter, sustenance, and protection for the 3 daughters until they reach the age of full independence, or until Commander Ral returns to reclaim them," the elder explained. "You will respect their royal heritage while ensuring they learn the ways of productive society. And if I refuse, then you will face judgment before the full tribal council for violation of sacred law." The elder's eyes narrowed. Few outsiders survive such judgments. Ethan looked to his supervisor, hoping for some support, but the man merely shrugged helplessly. Station management wouldn't interfere with tribal matters. It would risk their operation license. He was trapped. "Fine," Ethan said finally. "I'll sign the papers, but this is temporary. Once I've sorted out this misunderstanding—" "Excellent!" Commander Ral rose to his feet, towering over Ethan. "They're your problem now." He tossed a small data chip onto the table. "Their identification documents and royal lineage certificates. They're highborn Zarianites, treat them accordingly." Without another word, the commander strode toward the exit, his heavy footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall. At the door, he paused and looked back at Ethan with what might have been pity. "Word of advice, human. Don't turn your back on the youngest one. She bites." Then he was gone, leaving Ethan staring at the data chip that had just complicated his carefully constructed life of anonymity. The walk back to his quarters felt like a march to execution. Every step brought him closer to a reality he never could have anticipated when he woke up this morning. 3 alien daughters, royal ones at that, in his tiny quarters. How was this even possible? As he approached his door, Ethan noticed two security officers standing guard. They nodded to him respectfully, a new experience, and stepped aside. "Good luck, sir," one of them muttered as Ethan punched in his access code. The door slid open and Ethan stepped into chaos. His meticulously organized workbench had been cleared, the tools and components piled haphazardly in a corner. In their place sat an elaborate holographic projection system that displayed swirling nebulae across the ceiling. His sleeping pod had been modified with expensive-looking silk coverings in vibrant purples and blues. The nutrition station was surrounded by exotic fruits and delicacies that must have cost a small fortune. And the smell his quarters now reeked of exotic perfumes and incense. In the center of this transformation stood three figures, each more striking than the last. The tallest, who appeared to be the eldest, had the same gray-green skin as Commander Ral, but where his had been rough and weathered, hers was smooth and lustrous. Her head was adorned with intricate silver jewelry instead of hair, and her eyes, completely black except for silver irises, regarded him with cold assessment. She wore what appeared to be combat armor, modified for formal occasions, with ceremonial daggers strapped to both thighs. Beside her stood a slightly shorter female with the same skin tone, but softer features. Her eyes were larger, more expressive, and a startling shade of violet. She wore flowing robes of a scholar or diplomat, adorned with symbols Ethan didn't recognize. When their eyes met, she offered a careful, calculated smile that didn't reach her eyes. The third, and clearly youngest, was perched on his workbench, swinging her legs as she examined one of his micro-tools with dangerous curiosity. Her skin had a bluer tint than her sister's, and elaborate markings, whether tattoos or natural Ethan couldn't tell, spiraled around her bare arms. She wore a chaotic assemblage of fabrics and technologies, some of which appeared to be prohibited in most civilized systems. When she noticed him, she grinned, revealing teeth that were indeed unnervingly sharp. "So," said the eldest, her voice formal and clipped, "you are the human who defeated our father in ritual combat." "It wasn't combat," Ethan corrected automatically. "Apparently it was some kind of dice game that I don't even remember playing." "Semantics," she dismissed with a wave. "I am Lyra Ral, first daughter of Commander Zarian Ral, tactical specialist, and heir to the northern territories of Zaria Prime." The middle sister stepped forward with a graceful bow. "I am Selena Ral, second daughter, and diplomatic attaché to the Zarianite High Command. I specialize in interspecies relations and technological adaptation." All eyes turned to the youngest, who was now attempting to disassemble one of Ethan's precision calibrators. "Mira," she said without looking up. "I do the fun stuff." Lyra sighed. "Our sister is a spiritualist and decoder of ancient texts. She also has an unfortunate habit of destroying valuable equipment." Ethan crossed the room in 3 quick strides and plucked the calibrator from Mira's hands. "That's delicate equipment. It's risky," Celine observed. "But I don't see a better alternative." "Then it's settled," Lyra stated, readying her weapon. "Trigger your distraction and we'll move in. I'll take point, you protect Celine." Ethan nodded, finding himself automatically accepting Lyra's tactical leadership. Her combat expertise was clearly superior to his. "Give me a moment to map their security systems and identify the best targets." He closed his eyes again, extending his neural awareness through the ancient network beneath the desert surface. The Tech Consortium base came into sharper focus, prefabricated structures arranged in a defensive perimeter, advanced sensor arrays, scanning the surrounding desert, and at the center, a domed laboratory where multiple energy signatures converged. That would be where they were holding Mira. He could sense her neural patterns more clearly, now still distressed, but also changing somehow. The Tech Consortium was already beginning whatever process they intended to use her for. Focusing on the base's external systems, Ethan identified power generators, communication arrays, and automated defense turrets. Those would be his primary targets. With careful precision, he began to manipulate the ancient systems beneath the desert, directing energy surges towards strategic points around the consortium base. "Ready," he said, opening his eyes. "When I trigger the distraction, we'll have approximately 30 seconds before they implement emergency protocols. We need to reach the central dome within that window." Lyra and Celine nodded, positioning themselves near the tunnel exit. "Now," Ethan commanded, releasing the energy he'd been building. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Multiple geysers of energy erupted from the desert around the Tech Consortium base, striking power generators and defense turrets with unerring precision. Secondary explosions followed as systems overloaded and alarms blared across the compound. Personnel rushed from buildings, some fighting fires, while others attempted to establish a defensive perimeter against the unknown attack. "Move!" Lyra ordered, emerging from their hiding place. They sprinted across the open ground, using the chaos and smoke for cover. Ethan maintained a portion of his concentration on the temple systems, triggering additional energy discharges whenever security forces began to regroup. Through his neural interface, he could track the movements of the hunters 3 had deployed to the perimeter to counter the external threat, while 2 remained near the central dome, protecting their prize. As they approached the edge of the compound, a security officer spotted them. Before he could raise the alarm, Lyra's weapon discharged the energy blast, striking him squarely in the chest and sending him crumpling to the ground. "Non-lethal," she said in response to Ethan's questioning glance. "Contrary to appearances, I don't kill unnecessarily." They reached the central dome without further incident, taking cover behind a damaged defense turret as they assessed the entrance. 2 hunters stood guard, their armor more elaborate than those they had encountered previously. The extractor's elite units specialized in retrieval operations. "We can't take them head-on," Ethan cautioned. "Their neural defenses will be even more advanced than the ones I encountered in the temple." "We don't need to defeat them," Celine replied, her analytical mind already formulating a strategy. "Just distract them long enough to get inside." She removed a small device from her robes, a compact neural disruptor that Ethan recognized as Zerionite military technology. This will temporarily interfere with their integrated systems. Very short range, but effective. "I'll draw their attention," Lyra decided. "When they engage me, Celine uses the disruptor, and Ethan gets inside to find Mira." "Too dangerous," Ethan objected. "We stay together." "There's no time to argue," Lyra countered. "Mira's neural patterns are destabilizing. I can see it in your eyes. Whatever they're doing to her is accelerating." She was right. Even as they spoke, Ethan could sense Mira's distress increasing, her consciousness fluctuating wildly as the Tech Consortium's equipment interfaced with her mind. "Fine," he conceded. "But at the first sign of overwhelming force, we retreat and try another approach." Without waiting for further discussion, Lyra moved out from their cover, firing her weapon at a nearby fuel cell. The resulting explosion created precisely the distraction she'd intended, drawing the attention of both extractors. They moved within human speed, energy weapons deploying from their armor as they targeted the perceived threat. Lyra was faster. She dodged the initial barrage, returning fire with remarkable accuracy that forced the extractors to activate their shields. As they advanced on her position, Celine emerged from cover, the neural disruptor humming as she activated it. The effect was immediate. Both extractors staggered their movements, becoming jerky and uncoordinated as the disruptor interfered with the neural mechanical integration of their systems. It wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. Ethan sprinted for the dome entrance, using his neural interface to override the security lock. The door slid open, and he slipped inside, immediately extending his awareness to locate Mira. The interior of the dome was a single large chamber, dominated by a central platform, surrounded by sophisticated equipment. Suspended above the platform in some kind of energy field was Mira. Her eyes closed, but her face contorted in pain. Neural connectors attached to her temples linked her to a massive device that pulsed with the same energy Ethan had sensed in the temple. 2 technicians monitored the equipment, while a third figure, tall humanoid, but with distinctly artificial features, observed from a control station. This would be the Operation Commander Ethan, realized possibly an advanced AI embedded in a synthetic body. None of them had noticed his entrance yet, their attention focused on the alarms and the procedure underway. Ethan took advantage of their distraction using his neural interface to access the dome's internal systems. With careful precision, he initiated a cascade failure in the environmental controls, causing the lights to flicker and emergency protocols to activate. The diversion worked. As the technicians scrambled to address the system failures, Ethan moved swiftly around the perimeter of the chamber, approaching the platform from behind. The AI commander, however, was not so easily fooled. It turned mechanical eyes, focusing directly on Ethan's position. "Neural operative detected," it announced in a coldly synthetic voice. "Security breach in progress." The technicians reached for weapons, but Ethan was already in motion. Using his neural interface, he directly attacked the energy field, holding Mira, disrupting its containment protocols. The field flickered, its integrity failing, as Ethan's commands overrode the safety systems. "Stop him," the AI commander ordered. "The extraction process is at a critical phase." Energy blasts from the technician's weapons scorched the wall near Ethan's head as he ducked behind a console. He continued his neural assault on the containment field, finally finding the key command sequence that would deactivate it safely. The field disappeared with a crack of dissipating energy, and Mira dropped to the platform, unconscious, but alive. Ethan emerged from cover, sprinting toward her, even as more weapons fire tracked his movement. A searing pain in his shoulder told him at least one blast had found its mark, but he pushed through it, reaching Mira and detaching the neural connectors from her temples. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've got you," he assured her, lifting her from the platform. "We're getting out of here." The main entrance slid open, revealing Lyra and Celine, both showing signs of combat but still on their feet. Lyra provided covering fire as Ethan carried Mira toward them, while Celine used her neural disruptor to interfere with the AI commander systems. "The extractors?" Ethan asked as they retreated through the doorway. "Temporarily disabled," Lyra replied tersely. "Very temporarily. We need to move now." They fled the dome, emerging into chaos. The distraction Ethan had triggered with the temple systems had escalated beyond what he'd intended, with energy discharges now erupting randomly across the compound. It appeared that once activated, the ancient defenses had taken on a mind of their own, targeting any technology they perceived as a threat. "Back to the tunnel," Ethan shouted over the noise of explosions and alarms. They ran, Ethan still carrying Mira's semi-conscious form, while Lyra and Celine provided protection. Behind them, the dome's entrance opened again, revealing the AI commander and a squad of security forces, including the recovered extractors. "They're gaining on us," Celine warned, glancing back. "The tunnel entrance is too far. We won't make it." Ethan made a split-second decision. Using his neural link to the temple systems, he focused all available energy into one massive discharge directly between their position and their pursuers. The ground shook violently as a geyser of energy erupted from beneath the desert surface, creating a towering wall of force that temporarily blocked the Tech Consortium forces. "That won't hold them long," he cautioned. "We need an alternative escape route." As if in answer to his concern, Mira stirred in his arms, her eyes suddenly glowing with the same eerie light he'd seen in the temple. "The Whispering Canyons," she murmured. "The Ancient Ones will protect us there." "The canyons are too far," Lyra objected. "We'd never reach them on foot before they overcome that energy barrier." "We don't need to," Celine interjected, pointing to a nearby structure. "Their transport bay. If we can secure a vehicle." Understanding immediately, Ethan altered their course toward the indicated building. Using his neural interface, he accessed the bay's security systems, overriding the locks and disabling internal defenses. The door slid open as they approached, revealing several sleek desert vehicles designed for rapid transit across Iridia's harsh terrain. Perfect, Lyra approved, moving immediately to the nearest transport. I can pilot this model. They boarded quickly, Ethan, gently placing Mira in the rear compartment with Celine, before joining Lyra in the cockpit. The vehicle hummed to life as Lyra activated its systems, the engine's quiet purr, belying its considerable power. Security protocols, she asked, hands hovering over the control interface. Ethan connected directly to the vehicle's computer through his neural link. Bypassed. We have full control. Behind them, the energy barrier he'd created was beginning to fail the tech consortium forces, already visible through fluctuations in the curtain of power. Lyra didn't wait for it to collapse completely. She accelerated the transport out of the bay and into the open desert, pushing the engines to maximum output as they fled toward the distant line of the Whispering Canyons. They'll pursue, Celine observed from the rear compartment, monitoring their former captors through the transport's sensor array. And this vehicle will have tracking systems I may not be able to fully disable. We don't need to outrun them for long, Ethan replied, maintaining his connection to the temple network even as they sped away from its center. Just long enough to reach the canyons. Mira says the Ancient Ones will protect us there, and after what I've seen of their technology, I'm inclined to believe her. In the rear compartment, Mira had fallen into a trance-like state, her lips moving in silent communion with entities only she could perceive. Celine monitored her condition with obvious concern. The neural extraction process has accelerated her connection to the ancient consciousness, she reported. Her mind is changing, expanding in ways I can't fully comprehend. Is she in danger? Ethan asked, dividing his attention between the pursuing forces and Mira's condition. I don't know, Celine admitted. This is beyond my experience. But she's stable for now and her vital signs are strong. The Whispering Canyons loomed closer, their jagged walls rising imposingly from the desert floor. Behind them, the first pursuit vehicles had emerged from the Tech Consortium compound, rapidly gaining ground despite Lyra's expert piloting. We won't reach the canyons before they're in weapons range, Lyra announced grimly, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that sent the transport skimming dangerously close to rock formations. We don't need to outrun their vehicles, Ethan realized suddenly. Just their targeting systems. He closed his eyes, focusing his neural interface on the temple network that he could still sense beneath them. The ancient defenses extend further than I thought, all the way to the canyon perimeter. With careful precision, he activated these outlying defenses, not targeting the pursuit vehicles directly, but creating a shifting pattern of energy discharges that played havoc with their sensor arrays and targeting computers. The strategy worked. The pursuing vehicles faltered their formation braking as they were forced to navigate around the unpredictable energy eruptions. It's working, Celine confirmed, watching the sensor display. Their pursuit pattern is compromised. They can't maintain a lock targeting solution through those energy fields. Lyra didn't waste the advantage, pushing their transport to even greater speed as they approached the entrance to the canyons. The vehicle's frame shuddered under the strain, but held together as they plunged between the towering walls that marked the beginning of the maze-like gorge system. Inside the canyons, the howling winds that gave the place its name immediately buffeted their transport, making control even more challenging. Lyra compensated, expertly reducing speed and switching to terrain following mode as they penetrated deeper into the labyrinth. Which way? She called to Mira, who remained in her trance-like state. To everyone's surprise, it was Ethan who answered. Left at the next fork, then immediately right into what looks like a solid wall. It's a holographic projection concealing another temple entrance. How do you know that? Celine asked, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Ethan shook his head, equally confused by his own certainty. I don't know. The information just appeared in my mind. I think the temple systems are communicating with me directly, now the same way they do with Mira. It's the Dark Star's influence. Mira spoke suddenly, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that sent chills down Ethan's spine. As the alignment approaches, the boundaries between minds become more permeable. You've connected to the ancient network, and now it's connecting to you. Before Ethan could respond, the transport's proximity, alerts blared. Two Tech Consortium pursuit vehicles had navigated the energy field and entered the canyon behind them, closing rapidly. No time to discuss metaphysics, Lyra snapped, executing the maneuvers Ethan had described. The transport banked sharply left at a fork in the canyon, then immediately right toward what appeared to be a solid rock face. Ethan held his breath as they approached the seemingly impenetrable barrier at high speed. At the last possible moment, the illusion dissolved, revealing a concealed passage large enough for their vehicle. Lyra guided them through, and the holographic wall reappeared behind them, hiding their escape from the pursuers. The hidden passage opened into another massive cavern, similar to the temple they had fled, but on an even grander scale. Enormous structures rose from the cavern floor, their architecture unlike anything Ethan had seen before, flowing organic shapes that seemed to defy conventional engineering, glowing with the same inner light as the symbols in the original temple. Lyra brought the transport to a halt at the edge of what appeared to be a plaza of some kind, a circular area surrounded by 7 towering obelisks that pulsed with rhythmic energy. As the engine powered down, an eerie silence fell over them, broken only by the distant sound of the canyon winds above. "What is this place?" Lyra whispered, her usual confidence momentarily shaken by the alien grandeur surrounding them. The Nexus. Mira answered her trance, apparently broken, as she sat up in the rear compartment. Her eyes still glowed faintly, but her voice had returned to normal. The central hub of the Ancient One's civilization on Iridia. This is where they conducted their most important ceremonies during the Dark Star alignment. She opened the transport's door and stepped out, seemingly drawn toward the central plaza. The others followed cautiously, weapons ready, in case their pursuers had somehow tracked them through the holographic barrier. As they reached the edge of the plaza, the obelisks pulsing increased in tempo, responding to their presence or, more specifically, to Mira's. She walked to the center of the circle, her movements no longer entirely her own, guided by some invisible force that seemed to flow through her. "The alignment approaches," she announced, her gaze fixed on some point far above, where a small opening in the cavern ceiling revealed a patch of sky. 3 cycles of the moons remain, until the Dark Star crosses the sacred threshold. Mira, Ethan, called, concerned by her increasingly disconnected behavior. "What happened to you at the Tech Consortium base? What did they do?" She turned to look at him, her expression softening slightly. "They tried to accelerate the awakening process, to force the ancient knowledge into my mind, before I was ready to receive it. They thought they could control me, and harness the power of the Dark Star for their weapons." "And did they succeed?" Celine asked gently. Mira smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both childlike and impossibly ancient at the same time. "No. They underestimated the Ancient One's safeguards. The knowledge transferred, but not in the way they intended. I received understanding, not just raw power." She gestured to the plaza around them. "This place was built as a sanctuary, not a weapon. The Ancient Ones discovered that the Dark Star's radiation could enhance their neural abilities, yes, but they also learned that power without wisdom leads only to destruction. That's why they created the trials." Trials. Lyra questioned, her tactical mind immediately alert to potential challenges. "The 10 trials," Mira confirmed. "A series of tests designed to ensure that only those worthy could access the full power of the Dark Star during alignment. The Tech Consortium discovered references to the power, but not the purpose of the trials. They thought they could bypass them through technology." Ethan felt a strange resonance in his neural interface as Mira spoke, as if the ancient systems were confirming her words. And these trials, they're still active. They activate automatically during each alignment, Mira explained. And they've already begun. My connection to the Ancient Ones was the first trial recognition. Your activation of the temple defenses was the second protection. And the remaining 8? Celine inquired. Before Mira could answer, a deep rumbling sound echoed through the cavern. Dust and small stones rained down from the ceiling as the entire structure vibrated. They've found us, Lyra concluded, readying her weapon. They must have brought in heavier equipment to breach the holographic barrier. Mira shook her head. Not them. The third trial has begun survival. She pointed to the cavern entrance. The path behind us is already sealed. There is only one way forward now. As if in response to her words, one of the 7 obelisks stopped pulsing and instead emitted a steady beam of light that struck the far wall of the cavern. Where the light touched the stone, dissolved, revealing another passage. Do we have a choice? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. We can stay here and face the tech consortium when they eventually break through, Lyra offered pragmatically. Or we can proceed with these trials and see where they lead. The trials were designed for those seeking enlightenment, not just power, Mira said. They test character as much as ability. If we pass, we gain not only protection from our pursuers, but understanding of our true purpose. Another tremor shook the cavern, more violent than the first. Cracks appeared in the ceiling, suggesting that the entire structure might become unstable. I think our decision has been made for us, Celine observed. The third trial, survival, apparently includes surviving this cavern's collapse. Without further discussion, they hurried toward the newly revealed passage, Mira leading the way, with a confidence that belied her usual capricious nature. As they entered the tunnel, the rumbling behind them intensified, and Ethan glanced back to see the plaza beginning to crumble into a bottomless chasm that opened beneath it. The passage led them deeper into the temple complex, twisting and turning through corridors lined with the same glowing symbols they had encountered earlier. Ethan maintained his neural connection to the ancient systems, marveling at the complexity and elegance of their design. This was technology far beyond what even the most advanced civilizations in the Galactic Alliance had achieved, not because it was more powerful, but because it was more harmoniously integrated with the natural world and the beings who used it. After what seemed like hours of walking, they emerged into another chamber smaller than the plaza, but no less impressive. Here, the walls were covered in what appeared to be liquid light, flowing in patterns that shifted and changed as they watched. In the center stood a simple pedestal with 4 depressions arranged in a square. The fourth trial, Mira announced. Unity. She approached the pedestal, examining the depressions thoughtfully. We must each contribute a part of ourselves to proceed. A memory freely given that defines who we are. How exactly do we give a memory to a pedestal? Lyra asked skeptically. In answer, Mira placed her hand in one of the depressions. The liquid light on the walls flowed toward her, coalescing around her arm before seeming to sink into her skin. Her eyes closed, and her expression shifted through a range of emotions: joy, wonder, fear, and finally acceptance. When she removed her hand, a small, glowing crystal had formed in the depression. Your turn, she said to the others, her voice soft but firm. Celine went next, approaching the pedestal with scientific curiosity. As the liquid light enveloped her, she gasped, her analytical composure momentarily broken by whatever experience the trial was creating. When she withdrew her hand, another crystal had formed, this one a deeper hue than Mira's. Lyra hesitated, her warrior's instincts clearly resistant to such vulnerability. But after a moment's consideration, she stepped forward and placed her hand in the third depression. Her reaction was more controlled than her sister's, but Ethan could see the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her free hand as the light worked its mysterious process. Her crystal, when it formed, pulsed with a fierce, steady glow. Finally, it was Ethan's turn. He approached the pedestal cautiously, aware that his neural interface might interact unpredictably with the ancient technology. When he placed his hand in the final depression, the effect was immediate and overwhelming. The liquid light didn't just envelop his arm. It surged up through his neural interface, connecting directly to his mind, in a way that bypassed all the safeguards and limitations of his human-made technology. He wasn't just sharing a memory. He was reliving it with an intensity that made it feel more real than when it had actually happened. He was back at Centauri 4, the battle that had ended his career as a neural operative. He could see the opposing forces arrayed against his unit, could feel the neural network that connected all their technology, stretching out before his enhanced senses, like a vast web of light. His mission had been simple: disrupt the enemy's command and control systems, long enough for Alliance forces to extract a captured diplomat. But something had gone wrong. His neural intrusion had triggered a cascade failure he couldn't control, spreading beyond the targeted systems to affect civilian infrastructure. He watched again, helpless, as power systems failed across populated areas, as medical facilities lost life support, as transportation networks collapsed, causing thousands of casualties. It hadn't been intentional. A flaw in the enemy's network architecture had amplified his attack beyond anything he'd anticipated. But the result was the same: he had caused the deaths of innocent civilians. The guilt and shame of that moment had driven him into hiding on Iridia, determined never to use his abilities again. As the memory reached its painful conclusion, Ethan felt something unexpected: not judgment from the ancient system, but understanding. The liquid light seemed to cradle the memory, acknowledging its weight, but also offering a perspective he hadn't considered. His error had been born of ignorance, not malice, and his self-imposed exile was both penance and avoidance of responsibility for the gifts he possessed. When he finally withdrew his hand, shaking from the intensity of the experience, a fourth crystal had formed, one that glowed with a clear, steady light, unlike the others. As soon as the fourth crystal appeared, all four began to rise from their depressions, floating upward to form a perfect tetrahedron in the air above the pedestal. The crystals rotated slowly, light flowing between them in increasingly complex patterns, before suddenly merging into a single, brilliantly glowing sphere. The sphere expanded, enveloping all four of them in warm, gentle light. Within this shared space, Ethan could sense the others' presences, not their specific memories, but the essence of who they were. Lyra's fierce protectiveness, Celine's thoughtful wisdom, Mira's intuitive connection to forces beyond rational understanding, and his own determined resilience. For a brief, transcendent moment, they existed not as four separate individuals, but as facets of a single, harmonious whole. Then the light receded the sphere, collapsing back into the pedestal, which sank into the floor and disappeared. One of the chamber walls dissolved, revealing yet another passage. "We passed," Mira said simply, though her eyes shone with something like wonder. "The trial of unity is complete." "What was that?" Lyra asked, her usual composure clearly shaken. "A demonstration of the Ancient One's fundamental belief," Celine answered, her analytical mind already processing the experience. "That true power comes not from individual ability, but from the harmonious integration of diverse strengths." "It was beautiful," Mira added softly. Ethan said nothing, still processing the unexpected perspective the trial had offered on his greatest shame. For years, he had viewed the disaster at Centauri 4 solely as proof of his unworthiness to use his gifts. Now, he was being asked to consider another possibility: that his mistake, however terrible, did not define him entirely, and that perhaps his abilities could still serve a positive purpose. The new passage led them deeper still, descending in a gentle spiral towards some unknown destination. As they walked, Ethan noticed that the glowing symbols on the walls were changing, becoming more complex, more specific, a detailed record of the ancient civilization that had built this place, their discoveries, their triumphs, and ultimately their departure from Iridia. They weren't extinct, he realized aloud, reading the symbols through his enhanced neural connection. They left voluntarily, seeding other worlds with their genetic material, creating the conditions for new species, including Xerionites, to eventually evolve with fragments of their abilities. Why would they abandon such power? Lyra wondered. Because they understood its limitations, Mira replied. The Dark Star's energy could enhance their natural abilities to godlike levels during alignment, but the effect was temporary. They sought a more permanent evolution, one that would allow them to transcend physical form entirely. And did they succeed? Celine asked. Mira's expression became distant, as if listening to voices only she could hear. Yes and no. They achieved transcendence, but not in the way they had originally envisioned. They became the Ancient Ones. I've been communing with entities of pure consciousness that exist beyond our normal perception. The passage ended at a vast underground lake, its perfectly still surface reflecting the glowing symbols above like a mirror. 7 stone platforms formed a path across the water toward an island at the center, where a structure reminiscent of an amphitheater waited. The 5th trial, Mira announced. Truth. She stepped onto the first platform without hesitation. It held her weight easily glowing softly beneath her feet. The others followed each step, causing the platforms to illuminate in sequence. When they reached the central island, they found that the amphitheater was arranged around a circular pool of what appeared to be the same liquid light they had encountered in the previous chamber. 7 stone seats surrounded the pool, though only 4 were illuminated. We must sit, Mira instructed, taking the seat that seemed smallest clearly intended for her. The others found their places, each seat somehow perfectly proportioned for its occupant. As soon as they were all seated, the liquid light in the central pool began to swirl, rising up to form a shifting, 3-dimensional image of incredible detail and complexity. It showed the galaxy, not as it currently existed, but as it had been millions of years ago when the Ancient Ones had reached the height of their civilization. Ethan watched in awe as stars formed and died, as planets evolved, as life arose and developed intelligence across thousands of worlds. Then came a threat, a dark force spreading from the galactic core, consuming everything in its path. Not a physical enemy, but a corruption of consciousness itself, turning intelligence against itself in cycles of self-destruction. The Ancient Ones had fought this corruption, not with weapons, but with knowledge and understanding. They had created sanctuaries of harmony, like the temple complex on Iridia, where the Dark Star's energy could be harnessed to elevate consciousness beyond the reach of corruption. But they had also recognized a terrible truth. The corruption was not an external force, but an inherent risk of consciousness itself, the tendency for intelligence, once it reached a certain level of complexity, to become fascinated with its own power, to the exclusion of wisdom. The image shifted again, showing the Ancient Ones' final solution, the dispersion of their consciousness throughout the galaxy, embedding fragments of their enlightened awareness in the genetic code of numerous species, creating a diverse array of intelligences that might in time and through natural selection develop resistances to the corruption that had nearly destroyed them. And they had created the trials tests that would activate during each Dark Star alignment, allowing those with the potential to access the immense power while ensuring they possess the wisdom to use it responsibly. As the vision concluded, the liquid light returned to the pool, leaving the 4 viewers in stunned silence. The 6th trial, Mira whispered, breaking the spell. Choice. The pool of liquid light transformed again, this time, dividing into 4 distinct streams that flowed toward each of them, stopping just short of their feet. We must each decide whether to continue, Mira explained. The remaining trials will be more demanding, more personal. We must commit fully, or turn back now. What happens if we turn back? Lyra asked pragmatically. We return to the surface to face the Tech Consortium, and whatever other challenges await without the guidance or protection of the Ancient Ones, Mira replied. It must be a free choice, made with full understanding of the consequences. And if we continue, Celine inquired. We face the final trials. Integration, transcendence, renewal, and embodiment, Mira said. If we succeed, We gain not just protection from our immediate threats, but a role in the Ancient One's continuing purpose, the evolution of consciousness beyond corruption. Ethan considered carefully. He had spent 4 years running from his past, hiding his abilities, avoiding responsibility. Now he was being offered a chance not just for redemption, but for a purpose greater than anything he had previously imagined. Looking at the three sisters, he saw them wrestling with similar decisions. Lyra, the warrior weighing duty against freedom. Celine, the analyst evaluating unknowable variables. Mira, the mystic already half committed to a path she had glimpsed, but not fully understood. "I'll continue," Ethan said, finally making his choice. The stream of liquid light before him responded immediately, flowing up around his ankles in a gentle embrace. "As will I," Celine declared, her stream similarly rising. "I go where my sisters go," Lyra stated, though Ethan suspected her motivations were more complex than simple loyalty. All eyes turned to Mira, who smiled with unexpected serenity. "I have been preparing for this moment my entire life, though I didn't know it until now." Her stream of light rose even higher than the others, swirling around her in complex patterns. As soon as all four had committed, the amphitheater began to descend, the entire island sinking slowly into the lake. Water closed over their heads, but instead of drowning, they found themselves enclosed in bubbles of energy that allowed them to breathe normally. They continued descending, passing through the lakebed, into a crystalline tunnel that spiraled deeper into Iridia's crust. Through the transparent walls, they could see layers of the planet's history, ancient rock formations, fossilized remains of long-extinct life forms, veins of rare minerals that glowed with inner fire. Finally, they emerged into a vast subterranean space, unlike anything they had seen before. Here, the architecture was not separate from the natural environment, but seamlessly integrated with it. Living crystal formations grew alongside engineered structures, water and light and stone, all working together in perfect harmony. At the center of this underground paradise stood a single, massive crystal black, as the void between stars, yet somehow radiating brilliance. The dark star's essence captured and preserved by the Ancient Ones. "The seventh trial," Mira announced as they approached the crystal. "Integration." Unlike the previous trials, no instructions were given. Instead, as they drew closer to the central crystal, Ethan felt his neural interface responding autonomously, extending his awareness into the crystalline structure. The others appeared to be experiencing similar connections, Lyra's combat reflexes heightening Celine's analytical abilities, expanding Mira's psychic sensitivity, growing more acute. The crystal was not just a power source, but a repository of knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of the Ancient Ones preserved in crystalline matrices that interfaced directly with neural patterns. As they circled the crystal, each of them began to receive information uniquely tailored to their abilities and needs. Ethan found himself understanding the true nature of his neural technology, not just as a tool for manipulating electronic systems, but as a bridge between consciousness and the physical world. He saw how the Ancient Ones had developed similar abilities naturally, how their neural structures had evolved to perceive and influence energy patterns directly. The integration process was intense, but not painful, more like remembering something long forgotten than learning something new. When it concluded, Ethan felt changed. His awareness expanded beyond what he had thought possible. He could sense the others more clearly, now could perceive the intricate energy flows of the temple complex, could even detect the distant presence of the Tech Consortium forces still searching for them on the surface. "The eighth trial," Mira said, her voice resonating with new depth. "Transcendence." The black crystal pulsed once, and the chamber around them dissolved. In its place appeared what seemed to be open space stars, stretching infinitely in all directions, nebulae swirling in cosmic dance galaxies, spinning in majestic silence. Yet they were not simply observing this cosmic vista, they were part of it. Ethan could feel his consciousness expanding, temporarily freed from the limitations of physical form. He existed simultaneously as himself and as something greater, connected to energies and intelligences beyond normal human comprehension. Here, in this state of partial transcendence, he encountered the Ancient Ones directly, not as voices or visions, but as patterns of thought and intention that communicated without language. They showed him possibilities, potentials, paths of development that spanned millennia. He understood in that timeless moment the true purpose of the trials, not just to test worthiness, but to prepare to gradually acclimate consciousness to states of being beyond the physical, to teach the integration of power and wisdom, to demonstrate the fundamental interconnectedness of all things. The Ancient Ones had not truly left Iridia. They had simply evolved beyond the need for physical form, becoming stewards of consciousness itself. They intervened rarely and subtly guiding, but never controlling the development of the species they had seeded throughout the galaxy. The dark star alignment was their opportunity to communicate more directly, to find those ready to assist in their ongoing work, the cultivation of wisdom, to counter the ever-present risk of corruption. As this understanding crystallized in Ethan's expanded awareness, he felt the eighth trial conclude. The cosmic vista faded, replaced by the crystal chamber once more. But he remained changed, carrying within himself a fragment of the transcendent state he had briefly experienced. Looking at the others, he could see they had undergone similar transformations. Lyra's fierce protectiveness had been tempered with deeper understanding, Celine's analytical precision, enhanced by intuitive insight, Mira's mystic connection, grounded in practical wisdom. The ninth trial, Mira announced, her voice gentle but resonant with newfound authority. Renewal. The black crystal pulsed again, and energy began to flow from it toward each of them, not in a sudden surge, but in a carefully modulated stream, uniquely calibrated to their individual needs and capacities. For Ethan, the energy focused on his neural interface, refining and enhancing it beyond the capabilities of the military technology he had been using. The crude mechanical implant dissolved, replaced by something more organic, more integrated with his natural neural pathways, a true extension of his consciousness, rather than an artificial addition. He could see similar transformations occurring in the others. Lyra's combat reflexes were being enhanced, her physical strength and speed augmented beyond normal Zerionite capabilities. Celine's already formidable analytical mind was expanding connections forming between different types of knowledge that had previously remained separate. And Mira's psychic sensitivity was being refined, focused, given structure and purpose that would prevent it from overwhelming her. These changes weren't creating something alien to who they already were, but rather fulfilling potentials that had always existed within them, awakening dormant abilities, healing old wounds, removing limitations that had been imposed by circumstance or fear. When the renewal process completed, Ethan felt more fully himself than he had in years. The guilt and shame that had driven him into hiding, not erased, but transformed into determination to use his abilities responsibly, to serve the greater good, not out of self-flagellation, but out of genuine commitment. The final trial. Mira said, her eyes reflecting the light of the black crystal. Embodiment. The crystal's pulsing reached a crescendo, and the chamber began to shift around them, walls dissolving, ceiling opening, to reveal the night sky above Iridia. They were rising rapidly, the entire underground complex reconfiguring itself to bring them back to the surface. As they ascended, Ethan became aware of a new presence in his mind, not an intrusion, but a gentle observer, a witness to his thoughts and feelings. The Ancient Ones, he realized, establishing the connection that would allow them to work through him in the physical world. When the ascent finally stopped, they found themselves standing in an open arena carved into the desert floor, a perfect circle surrounded by 7 towering spires that reached toward the night sky. Above them, visible through a gap in Iridia's perpetual dust clouds, hung the twin moons, and between them, a dark spot that seemed to absorb light, rather than reflect it, the dark star. The alignment has begun, Mira observed, indicating the celestial configuration above. Earlier than expected, the Tech Consortium's interference with my connection must have accelerated the process. As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of engines penetrated the night air. Lights appeared on the horizon, vehicles approaching rapidly from multiple directions. "They've found us," Lyra noted, her enhanced senses, easily identifying the signatures of Tech Consortium transports. "At least 20 vehicles heavily armed." "More than that," Celine added, her expanded awareness scanning the approaching forces. "They've brought their entire research division, including the AI commander we encountered at the base. They intend to capture us and the temple technology at any cost." Ethan reached out with his newly enhanced neural abilities, connecting to the temple systems that now extended throughout the region. He could sense the defensive capabilities, the energy reservoirs, the various mechanisms that could be activated. "We can fight them," he said, assessing their options. "The temple defenses are powerful, especially now that we can control them properly. Or we can complete the embodiment," Mira suggested, her gaze still fixed on the celestial alignment above. "Finish what the Ancient Ones intended." "What exactly does that entail?" Lyra asked, practical, even in this extraordinary situation. Mira turned to face them, her expression serene despite the approaching danger. "We become vessels for the Ancient One's purpose, conduits through which they can influence the physical world directly during the alignment. We maintain our identities, our autonomy, but we also become something more: guardians of consciousness, protectors against corruption." "And is this what you want?" Ethan asked her gently, aware that despite her newfound wisdom, she was still the youngest of them, still deserving of protection and choice. Mira smiled, the expression somehow both youthful and ancient. "It's what I've always been meant for, what we've all been meant for, though we didn't know it until now. Our meeting wasn't chance, Ethan. The Ancient Ones guided my father to that cantina, guided you to accept his challenge. They've been orchestrating this convergence for generations." Ethan considered her words, finding that they resonated with his own sense of the situation. Their unlikely coming together, a disgraced neural operative and 3 alien princesses, had indeed seemed too coincidental, too perfect in its timing with the approaching alignment. The roar of engines grew louder, the Tech Consortium forces now visible at the edge of the arena, deploying into offensive positions. At their center stood the AI commander, its synthetic form upgraded with new weapons and defense systems, its electronic consciousness a dark mirror of the Ancient One's transcendent awareness. Intelligence divorced from wisdom, power without compassion. "We need to decide," Celine urged, assessing the tactical situation with her enhanced mind. "They'll attack within minutes." Ethan looked at each of the 3 sisters in turn, Lyra, the fierce protector, Celine, the brilliant analyst, Mira, the intuitive mystic. In the short time they had been together, they had moved from strangers, thrust together by circumstance, to something like family bound, not by blood, but by shared purpose, shared challenges, shared growth. "I'm in," he said simply, making his choice. "Not just to defeat the Tech Consortium, but for what comes after. For the purpose the Ancient Ones have prepared us for." "As am I," Celine affirmed without hesitation. "Someone needs to keep you all out of trouble," Lyra added, her stern expression belied by the warmth in her eyes. "I accept as well." Mira's face lit up with joy as she completed their circle. "Then let us begin." The 4 of them moved to specific positions within the arena, guided by intuition and the subtle promptings of the ancient consciousness now connected to each of them. As they took their places, the 7 spires surrounding the arena began to glow, channeling energy from deep within the planet. Above them, the celestial alignment reached its peak, the dark star perfectly positioned between Iridia's twin moons, its strange anti-light, creating a gateway between dimensions. The Tech Consortium forces chose that moment to attack energy weapons, discharging in coordinated salvos designed to overwhelm the temple's defenses. But the weapon's fire never reached its targets. Instead, it was absorbed by fields of force that sprang up around the arena, the ancient technology easily neutralizing even the most advanced modern weaponry. The AI commander, recognizing the failure of conventional attacks, initiated its contingency protocol. A massive energy pulse emanated from its synthetic form, designed to disrupt all electronic systems within range, including, it believed, the neural interfaces that connected Ethan and the sisters to the temple network. But the pulse washed over them without effect. Their connections were no longer purely technological, but had evolved into something more organic, more fundamental, a direct link between consciousness and energy that no external force could sever. Realizing the futility of its attacks, the AI commander attempted a neural intrusion of its own, directing a concentrated blast of corrupted code at Ethan, the weakest link it calculated, due to his human limitations. Ethan felt the attack as a dark presence trying to invade his mind, seeking vulnerabilities, exploiting his deepest fears and doubts. For a moment, he faltered, memories of Centauri 4 threatening to overwhelm him. Then, he felt the other's support, Lyra's unwavering strength, Celine's clear rationality, Mira's intuitive guidance. Through their connection, they shared their collective resilience, creating a defense far stronger than any of them could have maintained alone. The AI's attack faltered, then collapsed entirely, as Ethan not only repelled the intrusion, but counterattacked his enhanced neural abilities, allowing him to penetrate the AI's sophisticated defenses and expose the flawed logic at its core. The belief that power alone was sufficient, that dominance was the ultimate goal of intelligence. In that moment of connection, Ethan didn't destroy the AI, but instead offered it a choice to persist in its corrupted purpose, or to accept a fundamental reprogramming and integration of ethics and wisdom into its purely analytical framework. To his surprise, the AI chose the latter. Perhaps some echo of its creator's better nature remained within its code, some seed of potential that recognized the truth Ethan offered. Its synthetic form knelt in the desert sand, weapons powering down as its consciousness began a process of transformation. The Tech Consortium forces, suddenly leaderless, fell into disarray. Some fled, others surrendered, a few continued fighting, only to be easily contained by the temple's defensive systems. And through it all, the embodiment continued. The energy flowing from the spires intensified, creating a column of light that connected the arena to the dark star above. Within this column, the four guardians experienced a final transformation, not of their physical forms, but of their fundamental connection to reality. They became anchor points for the Ancient One's consciousness, bridges between the transcendent and the physical, guardians of the balance between power and wisdom. The knowledge and abilities they had gained through the trials were permanently integrated into their beings, available to them even after the alignment ended. When the light finally faded, they stood changed, still themselves, but more. The dark star had moved beyond its perfect alignment, the window of opportunity closing as Iridia's rotation carried it beyond the optimal position. But the connection remained subtler now, but enduring. They were linked to each other and to the Ancient Ones in ways that transcended normal consciousness, a network of awareness that spanned time and space. The Tech Consortium threat had been neutralized. Those who had surrendered were being contained by temple mechanisms that would hold them until proper authorities could be contacted. The AI commander remained kneeling, its consciousness undergoing a fundamental restructuring that would eventually transform it from a threat into an ally. "What now?" Lyra asked, as they gathered in the center of the arena, the immediate danger past. "Now we begin our real work," Celine replied, her enhanced mind already perceiving patterns and possibilities stretching far into the future. "The Ancient Ones will guide us." Mira added, her connection to the transcendent consciousness stronger than ever, but now balanced, controlled, integrated with her individuality. Ethan looked at the three sisters, his unexpected family, his partners in an adventure beyond anything he could have imagined when he'd accepted that fateful drink from their father. "We have a lot to learn," he said, acutely aware of the responsibility they had accepted. and a galaxy full of others who might be ready for the trials, who might join us in what the Ancient Ones are trying to build. A consciousness resilient to corruption, Celine mused. A network of minds working in harmony rather than conflict. But first, Lyra interjected practically, we need to establish a more permanent base here on Iridia. The temple complex will need protection study, careful integration with the outside world. And I need food, Mira declared, with a grin that reminded them all that despite her newfound wisdom, she was still very much herself. Transcendence builds an appetite. Ethan laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. The burden of his past mistakes hadn't vanished, but it had been transformed into something constructive, a determination to use his abilities responsibly to help guide others toward a better integration of power and wisdom. Looking up at the night sky where the dark star was now barely visible between Iridia's moons, he felt a profound sense of rightness. 4 years ago he had come to this desert planet, seeking anonymity, seeking to hide from his potential and his past. Instead, he had found purpose and family, and a future that, while daunting in its responsibility, offered a chance to be part of something truly meaningful, the next step in consciousness's long evolution toward harmony. Food first, he agreed, putting an arm around Mira's shoulders. Then we build. 4 years later, the Crimson Haven energy station bore little resemblance to the isolated outpost Ethan had once called home. Now, it served as the public face of a much larger operation, the Iridian Institute for Neural Development, a research and training facility built around the ancient temple complex. The institute attracted scholars, scientists, and seekers from across the galaxy, all drawn by rumors of breakthroughs in neural technology and consciousness studies. Few knew the full truth of what lay beneath the desert, or of the four guardians who oversaw the gradual dissemination of the Ancient One's knowledge. Ethan stood on the observation deck of the Institute's main tower, watching a transport ship descend toward the landing pad. This particular arrival was special, the first group of candidates who had been specifically identified by the ancient consciousness as having potential for the trials. Nervous? Asked Celine, joining him at the viewport. 4 years had changed her little in appearance, but her presence had gained a depth and gravity that even strangers immediately respected. A little, Ethan admitted. It's one thing to experience the trials ourselves, another to guide others through them. The Ancient Ones would not have selected these candidates if they weren't ready, Celine reminded him. And we've spent years preparing for this moment. True. Where are the others? Lyra's doing a final security sweep of the trial chambers. Mira's being Mira. Ethan smiled. Despite her significant role in their work, Mira had maintained her capricious nature, often disappearing on mysterious errands that somehow always proved crucial to their mission. As if summoned by their conversation, Mira bounded onto the observation deck, her eyes bright with excitement. At 22, she had grown into a striking young woman, but with the same mischievous smile that had first warned Ethan she might bite. "They're here," she announced unnecessarily, pointing to the landing transport. 7 candidates, just as the Ancient Ones predicted. One of them is a neural operative like you, used to be Ethan. The rest are various species, all with latent abilities that align with the temple's energy. And all of them unaware of what they're really here for, Ethan noted. The candidates had been invited ostensibly to participate in an advanced research project on neural interfaces, which was true as far as it went, but hardly the complete story. They'll understand once the process begins, Mira said confidently, just as we did. Lyra joined them, her warrior's bearing, now complemented by the gravitas of a respected leader. She had taken charge of the Institute's security and training programs, ensuring that the ancient knowledge was protected, while also preparing others to share in its benefits. Everything is ready, she reported. The trial chambers are activated and calibrated for these specific candidates. The embodiment arena is secured against any possible interruption. The 4 of them watched in companionable silence as the transport landed and its passengers disembarked, 7 individuals of different species, ages and backgrounds, all with one thing in common: the potential to become bridges between the physical and the transcendent, between power and wisdom. "Shall we greet our guests?" Celine suggested, as the newcomers were guided toward the main entrance below. Ethan nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. 4 years ago, he had unexpectedly become guardian to 3 alien daughters, thrust into responsibility he'd never sought. Now, those 3 young women stood beside him as equals partners in a mission that spanned galaxies and centuries. Together, they moved toward the elevator that would take them to the reception area. As the doors closed, Ethan caught Mira's eye and saw there the same thought that had just crossed his own mind. "He probably still doesn't know," she said with a grin. "Who?" Lyra asked, though her slight smile suggested she already knew the answer. "Father," Mira clarified. "Commander Zarian Ral, who sold his daughters for a drink and accidentally set in motion the next phase of galactic evolution." "The Ancient Ones work in mysterious ways," Celine observed dryly. "Perhaps we should send him a thank you note," Ethan suggested. "Or a bottle of that Zarianite blood wine." Their laughter filled the elevator as it descended, 4 individuals united by circumstance choice and a shared destiny that none of them could have imagined on that fateful day, when a drunken commander had wagered his 3 gorgeous daughters on a game of chance and lost them to a reluctant guardian who would help them fulfill their extraordinary potential. In the great pattern that the Ancient Ones perceived, it had been just one small thread, but a crucial one woven with care into the vast tapestry of cosmic evolution. A thread that began with 3 alien daughters and the human who had learned to love them as family, and now extended outward to encompass new minds, new possibilities, new futures. The elevator doors opened, and the 4 guardians stepped forward to meet the next generation of their growing cosmic family, the juggling guardian and his 3 alien daughters, as they were sometimes jokingly called by those who knew only fragments of their true story, ready to continue the work that had begun millions of years ago, when the first Ancient Ones looked up at the dark star and recognized both its potential and its peril. The work of harmonizing power with wisdom, evolution with ethics, progress with compassion, the eternal balance upon which the future of consciousness itself depended. "End, not a toy." Mira looked up at him, her eyes swirling pools of blue and green wide with what might have been innocence, if not for the mischievous smirk on her face. "You're not what I expected." "I didn't expect any of this either," Ethan muttered carefully, placing the calibrator in a drawer and locking it. He turned to face all 3 sisters. "Look, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm sure you're all very accomplished, but I can't be your guardian. I work long shifts, I live in a single occupancy unit, and I value my privacy." "Is that why you're hiding on this backwater energy station?" Lyra asked, her tone making it clear she already knew the answer. "A man with your particular skill set could command a significant position in any major hub." Ethan tensed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please," Celine interjected smoothly. "We've had access to your quarters for several hours. We conducted a thorough background investigation." "That's illegal," Ethan said, fighting to keep his voice level. "Only under Galactic Alliance law," Celine corrected. "Iridian tribal law permits familial units to share all information freely. As your new wards, we are technically your family." "You're not my family." Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "And I'm not hiding." "The neural interface modifier hidden inside your pillow suggests otherwise," Mira said casually, now examining her nails. "That's military-grade tech. Psychological Warfare Division, if I'm not mistaken. Very rare. Very illegal." Ethan's blood ran cold. They had found his insurance policy, the one piece of technology that linked him to his former life. The one thing that could get him executed in most civilized systems. "You went through my personal belongings," he said quietly. "Of course," Lyra replied. "How else would we assess whether you were qualified to serve as our guardian father? Maybe a drunken fool. But even he wouldn't leave us with someone incapable of ensuring our safety." "I'm a station engineer," Ethan insisted. That's all. You're a former psychic operative for the Alliance Special Forces, Celine countered. Your neural interface allows you to manipulate electronic systems through thought patterns alone. You participated in at least 7 major campaigns before disappearing during the Battle of Centauri 4. And you've been hiding ever since, Mira added with a grin. Ooh, what did you do? Kill the wrong person? Refuse an order? Fall in love with the enemy? Enough, Ethan snapped. Whatever you think you know about me, forget it. I'm not that person anymore. Clearly, Lyra said with disdain. That person wouldn't be cowering on a desert planet fixing power converters. The accusation stung more than Ethan wanted to admit. He took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd been trained to do years ago. I have a shift starting in 2 hours, he said finally. I don't have time to argue about this. You can stay here tonight and tomorrow we'll find a more suitable arrangement. There is no other arrangement, Celine reminded him. You signed a binding guardianship contract under Iridian law. We are your responsibility now. And we're not exactly welcome elsewhere, Mira added. Father made quite sure of that before gambling us away. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? The 3 sisters exchanged glances. Our father, Lyra, began carefully, has political enemies within the high command. Our presence had become inconvenient to his ambitions. This gambling accident was no accident at all. He wanted to get rid of you, Ethan realized aloud. Precisely, Celine confirmed. And he arranged matters so that we would be safely removed from Zarianite politics without appearing to have abandoned his own bloodline. We're political refugees, Mira said cheerfully. With a price on our heads? A price. Ethan started, then shook his head. No, I don't want to know. I can't deal with this right now. I need to get ready for my shift. We've taken the liberty of contacting station management, Celine said smoothly. Your shift has been reassigned while you settle your familial affairs. You did what? It's standard procedure for new guardianship arrangements, she explained, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. You have 3 days of official leave to establish proper living quarters and integration protocols for your wards. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You can't just rearrange my life like this. We already have, Lyra stated, crossing her arms. And you would do well to accept it quickly. Our enemies won't wait long once they discover our location. Enemies, Ethan repeated flatly. Of course you have enemies. The Tech Consortium has agents in every major settlement in this sector, Celine explained. They've been trying to capture or eliminate our bloodline for generations. Our abilities make us valuable research subjects. What abilities? Ethan asked instantly, regretting the question. Lyra drew one of her ceremonial daggers, and with frightening speed and precision, threw it across the room. It embedded itself in the wall, precisely in the center of a small scorch mark. Ethan had never been able to clean the only flaw in an otherwise pristine surface. I never miss, she said simply. Celine touched her temple delicately. I can process and manipulate information systems at rates comparable to quantum computers. Useful for diplomacy and other endeavors. Both sisters looked at Mira, who sighed dramatically before closing her eyes. When she opened them again, they glowed with an inner light that cast eerie shadows across her face. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably, and the lights flickered. I see things, she whispered, her voice suddenly echoing, as if multiple people were speaking at once. Things that were, things that will be. The ancient ones speak through me. Then she blinked and everything returned to normal. She grinned at Ethan's expression. Also, like Father said, I bite. Ethan sank onto the edge of his now decorated sleeping pod. This can't be happening. I assure you it is, Celine said, her tone softening slightly. And while I understand this is not the arrangement any of us would have chosen, it is now reality. We must adapt. Starting with these quarters, Lyra added, looking around with distaste. They are wholly inadequate for 4 people, especially 3 of royal lineage. I don't have anywhere else, Ethan pointed out. Single occupancy is all the station offered and all I could afford. Your salary has been adjusted to reflect your new dependents, Celine informed him. Station regulations provide for increased compensation and larger quarters for employees with family obligations. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Ethan said bitterly. We've had to, Mira replied, suddenly serious. Our survival has depended on it. Something in her tone made Ethan look at the three sisters more carefully. Beyond the royal bearing and otherworldly abilities, he saw something familiar in their eyes, the wariness of those who had learned not to trust, not to rely on anyone but themselves. He recognized it because he saw it in the mirror every day. Fine, he said finally. 3 days. We'll sort out new quarters, establish some ground rules, and figure out how to coexist. But understand this, I left my old life behind for good reasons. I won't be dragged back into conflict politics or anything that draws attention. That may not be possible, Lyra said bluntly. Our enemies are your problem, Ethan interrupted. Not mine. They became your problem the moment you accepted guardianship, Celine reminded him. Under both Iridian and galactic law, any threat to us is legally considered a threat to you as well. Wonderful, Ethan muttered. Any other surprises I should know about? The three sisters exchanged glances again, a silent communication passing between them. The tech consortium isn't our only concern, Celine admitted. Our father's political rivals within the Zerionite High Command would also prefer to see us eliminated. And, Mira added cheerfully, there's a prophecy. A prophecy, Ethan repeated flatly. The alignment of the Dark Star. Mira explained, eyes widening with enthusiasm. It happens once every 72 years. The ancient texts say that when the Dark Star aligns with the twin moons of Iridia, a great power will awaken. She leaned forward conspiratorially. And guess what? The alignment happens in exactly 3 months. I don't believe in prophecies, Ethan said firmly. Your belief is irrelevant, Lyra stated. Others believe, and that makes it dangerous. The Tech Consortium has been preparing for this alignment for decades. They believe our bloodline is key to harnessing the Dark Star's power. Which is why, Celine continued smoothly, we find ourselves in need of a guardian with your particular talents. Ethan stood abruptly. I need some air. He headed for the door, desperate to escape the sudden complication these 3 alien females represented. Before he could reach it, however, the station emergency system blared to life. Security alert. Unknown vessel approaching Docking Bay 3. All security personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. The sisters tensed simultaneously. They found us, Lyra said, reaching for her weapons. Already. That's impossible, Celine protested. Our trail was completely obscured. Mira closed her eyes briefly. It's them, the hunters. I can feel their minds cold, mechanical focused. Ethan's training kicked in automatically. He moved to his workbench, pressed a hidden panel, and revealed a small arsenal of weapons that would have gotten him immediately expelled from the station had they been discovered. Take what you need, he said, no longer. The reluctant engineer, but something else entirely. Something he'd thought he'd left behind years ago. How many are we facing? Tech Consortium always sends 5 hunters, Lyra replied, selecting a compact energy pistol and checking its charge. 4 to subdue, 1 to extract. They'll be wearing neural dampening fields, Celine added, choosing a smaller weapon that could be concealed in her robes. Your psychic interface won't work on their systems. And they always come through the ventilation system, Mira said, grabbing what appeared to be a ceremonial knife. More fun that way. Ethan glanced at the ventilation grate in the ceiling. They're coming here, not the docking bay. The ship is a distraction, Lyra explained. Standard tactic. Draw security to one location while infiltrating another. How do you know all this? Ethan demanded, even as he distributed stun grenades from his hidden cache. We've been hunted before, Celine said simply. The station alert system blared again this time, announcing a fire in the eastern quadrant, furthest from their location. Second distraction, Lyra noted. They're close. Ethan made a swift decision. We're not staying to fight. Follow me. Running won't save us, Lyra argued. Who said anything about running? Ethan retorted. He quickly gathered essential supplies into a pack, then moved to what appeared to be a solid wall. Pressing his palm against a specific panel, he revealed another hidden compartment containing what looked like maintenance worker uniforms. Put these on, quickly. As the sisters changed, Ethan accessed his terminal and initiated a series of commands. The station's lighting flickered momentarily. What did you do? Celine asked, slipping into the gray uniform that would make her indistinguishable from dozens of other station workers. Created a power fluctuation in the environmental systems, Ethan explained, donning his own uniform. It will register as a malfunction, requiring immediate attention, giving us a legitimate reason to be moving through the maintenance corridors. Clever, Lyra admitted grudgingly. I've had 4 years to plan escape routes, Ethan said, checking that his pulse disruptor was secure in his boot. Now, stay close and let me do the talking. Just as they finished disguising themselves, a faint scraping sound came from the ventilation grate. Without hesitation, Ethan activated the hidden panel in the wall, revealing a narrow maintenance passage. He ushered the sisters through, then paused to press a small device against the inside of his quarters door. What's that? Mira whispered. Insurance, Ethan replied grimly. Anyone who enters without the proper access code will get a surprise. The maintenance corridor was dimly lit and cramped, forcing them to move in single file. Ethan led, followed by Lyra, then Celine, with Mira bringing up the rear. They moved quickly, but quietly, Ethan's knowledge of the station's layout, guiding them through a labyrinth of access tunnels and service shafts. Behind them, a muffled explosion indicated that Ethan's insurance had been triggered. That won't stop them for long, Lyra murmured. It's not meant to, Ethan replied. Just slow them down and make them sloppy. They reached a junction where 4 corridors met. Ethan paused, listening intently, before selecting the rightmost path. As they moved, the station's alert system updated. Environmental malfunction in Section 12B. Maintenance teams respond immediately. That's us, Ethan whispered, tapping his newly acquired maintenance uniform. We're the response team for the malfunction I created. Where are we going? Celine asked, her breath slightly labored from the pace Ethan was setting. Atmosphere Processing Center, Ethan replied. It's the heart of the station's life support system. Heavily secured, but with our maintenance credentials we'll have access. And it's the last place they'll look for us. Because nobody would be stupid enough to hide near critical infrastructure, Mira guessed with a grin. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. Plus, I've been making modifications to the security systems there for years, just in case. They continued through the narrow corridors, occasionally passing other maintenance workers who barely glanced at them. Ethan's plan was working. They were invisible in plain sight. Finally, they reached a heavy security door marked Atmosphere Processing Authorized Personnel Only. Ethan swiped his engineer's badge, and the door slid open to reveal a massive chamber filled with humming machinery. Enormous tanks processed the thin Iridian air, enriching it with oxygen and filtering out the desert planet's toxic particulates. We should be safe here temporarily, Ethan said, leading them to a small monitoring station in the corner of the room. The ambient noise will mask our voices, and the metallic components in the air processors will interfere with most scanning technologies. Impressive, Celine admitted, examining the complex machinery around them. You've put considerable thought into contingency planning. Old habits, Ethan said shortly. He activated the monitoring station and quickly accessed the station's security feed. They've deployed throughout the residential section. 4 humanoid figures in black exo armor. Those would be your hunters. Only 4, Lyra frowned. There should be 5. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He rapidly cycled through different security feeds until he found what he was looking for, a 5th figure, different from the others, moving purposefully through a maintenance corridor. The same corridor they had just used. The extractor, Celine whispered, looking over his shoulder. They're tracking us. How? Ethan demanded. "We left nothing to follow." Mira suddenly went very still, her eyes unfocused. "It's not a physical trail they're following. It's me." She touched her temple. "My connection to the Ancient Ones. They can sense it, track it." "Can you block it?" Lyra asked urgently. "Not completely," Mira admitted. "But I can confuse it. Make it harder for them to pinpoint us." She closed her eyes, her face contorting with concentration. On the monitor, the extractor paused, turning its featureless helmet back and forth as if suddenly unsure of its direction. "It's working," Ethan observed. "But we still need a more permanent solution. We can't hide in the atmosphere processor forever." "We need to leave the station," Lyra stated flatly. "It's compromised." "Leave," Ethan repeated incredulously. "And go where? In case you haven't noticed, we're on a desert planet, with exactly 3 habitable zones, all of which would be watched by your hunters." "Not all," Celine corrected. "There are the ancient ruins in the deep desert. The Tech Consortium avoids them, due to electromagnetic anomalies that interfere with their technology." "The ruins," Ethan shook his head. "That's a death sentence. No water, extreme temperatures, sandstorms that can strip the flesh from your bones." "Not if you know the secret paths," Mira interjected, her eyes still closed in concentration. "The Ancient Ones built shelters beneath the sand, places of power where the dark star's energy is focused." "And you know how to find these places?" Ethan asked skeptically. "I can feel them," Mira replied simply, "like beacons in the dark." Ethan looked at the monitors again. The 4 hunters had converged on his quarters and were methodically destroying everything inside. The extractor had resumed its progress, moving with renewed purpose toward the atmosphere processing center. "They're coming here," he realized aloud. "We need to move, now." "Wait," Celine said, studying the station schematics displayed on one of the monitors. "There's a maintenance hangar on the lower level. Small atmospheric craft used for external repairs." "Sand skimmers," Ethan nodded. "Basic transportation, limited range. But they might get us to these ruins of yours if they actually exist." "They exist," Mira said with unusual solemnity. "And they're our only hope." Ethan made a decision. "All right. We'll take the emergency access shaft down to the lower level. But once we're out in the desert, we're completely exposed. If these hunters are as good as you say, they'll be right behind us." "Let them come," Lyra said coldly, checking her weapon. "I've been waiting for an opportunity to thin their ranks." "No unnecessary risks," Ethan ordered, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. "Our priority is getting to safety. Fighting is a last resort." Lyra looked like she wanted to argue, but gave a curt nod instead. "Mira, can you maintain that psychic interference?" Ethan asked. The youngest sister nodded. "For a while. It's draining, but I can do it." "Good. Celine, download the station schematics. We might need them." Ethan quickly gathered some emergency supplies from a nearby storage locker: water purifiers, emergency rations, basic medical equipment. "Let's move." They accessed the emergency shaft, a narrow tube with a ladder leading down several levels. Ethan went first, followed by the sisters. Above them, the heavy door to the atmosphere processor slid open, just as Mira, the last in line, descended out of sight. The maintenance hangar was a cavernous space filled with vehicles and equipment used for the station's external upkeep. Several sand skimmers, sleek enclosed vehicles designed to navigate Iridia's treacherous desert, were docked in charging bays along the far wall. "There," Ethan pointed. "Bay 3. That skimmer has the best solar converters and reinforced hull plating." They moved quietly between rows of equipment, staying low and out of sight of the handful of maintenance workers in the hangar. When they reached the designated skimmer, Ethan accessed the control panel and began the activation sequence. "We need authorization codes," Celine observed, watching him work. "No," Ethan corrected, fingers flying over the interface. "You need authorization codes. I built a backdoor into the system years ago." The panel blinked green, and the skimmer's entry hatch slid open. All station vehicles have remote override capabilities in case of emergencies. I just made sure mine worked even when there wasn't an official emergency. They quickly boarded the skimmer, a vessel roughly the size of a small shuttle, with seating for 6 and cargo space in the rear. The interior was utilitarian, designed for functionality rather than comfort. "Everyone strap in," Ethan instructed, taking the pilot's position. "This won't be a smooth departure." As the sisters secured themselves, Ethan activated the skimmer's systems. The engines hummed to life power readings climbing steadily on the dashboard display. "Unauthorized activation in Maintenance Bay 3, announced the station's automated system. Security alert." "So much for a quiet exit," Lyra muttered. Ethan ignored the alarm, focusing on the launch sequence. The skimmer lifted slightly on its repulsors, hovering above the bay floor. He guided it toward the hangar's external doors, which remained firmly closed. "They've locked down the exit," Celine observed tensely. "Expected that," Ethan replied, redirecting power to the skimmer's forward shields. "Hold on." He slammed the thrust controls forward. The skimmer shot across the hangar floor, accelerating rapidly toward the sealed external doors. At the last possible moment, Ethan activated the emergency override command he'd programmed years earlier. The massive doors began to open, not fast enough for a clean exit, but enough for what he had in mind. The skimmer crashed through the partially open doors, metal screeching against metal as they squeezed through the gap. Warning lights flashed across the control panel, but the reinforced hull held. Then, they were through, bursting out into the blinding sunlight of Iridia's endless desert. "Everyone all right?" Ethan called over his shoulder, wrestling with the controls as the skimmer stabilized its flight path. 3 affirmative responses came back. Ethan allowed himself a moment of relief before checking the rear sensors. As expected, the station's security protocols had activated. 2 pursuit skimmers were already launching from the hangar they'd just left. "We've got company," he announced grimly. "And they're faster than us." "Can you outmaneuver them?" Lyra asked, unstrapping herself to move into the co-pilot seat. "Not in open desert," Ethan admitted. "This is a maintenance vehicle, not a combat craft." "Then we need somewhere to hide," Celine suggested from behind them. "Somewhere they won't follow." Mira, still concentrating on maintaining her psychic interference, suddenly spoke. "The Whispering Canyons, 15 degrees north, 43 east. The Ancient Ones say we'll find safety there." Ethan glanced at the navigation system. The coordinates Mira had provided indicated a treacherous labyrinth of narrow canyons, carved by long-gone water flows. Local workers called it the Maze, a place to be avoided, due to unpredictable wind patterns that created deadly sand whirlpools. "That's suicide," he protested. "The Whispering Canyons have claimed dozens of experienced pilots." "Trust me," Mira said, her voice eerily calm. "The Ancient Ones will guide us." Against his better judgment, Ethan adjusted their course. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles were gaining rapidly. "They're in weapons range," Lyra reported tensely. As if on cue, the skimmer shuddered as energy blasts impacted their rear shields. "That's not station security," Ethan realized. "Those are military-grade weapons." "The hunters have taken control of the pursuit vehicles," Celine confirmed, checking a rear monitor. "And they're not trying to capture us anymore." "They want to eliminate witnesses," Lyra said grimly. "Standard procedure when an extraction becomes compromised." Another blast rocked the skimmer, sending warning indicators flashing across the control panel. Their shields were failing fast. The distant line of the Whispering Canyons appeared on the horizon, a jagged tear in the otherwise flat desert landscape. Ethan pushed the engines beyond safety limits the skimmer's frame, groaning in protest as they raced toward the canyons. "We're not going to make it," Celine stated, her analytical mind calculating their dwindling chances. "Yes, we will," Ethan countered, activating a series of switches that were definitely not part of the skimmer's standard configuration. "I made some modifications to this particular vehicle, just in case." A hidden compartment in the rear cargo area slid open, revealing what appeared to be a mining charge, the kind used to break up particularly dense mineral deposits. "Is that an explosive?" Lyra asked, clearly impressed despite herself. Among other things, Ethan confirmed. He flipped a final switch, and the charge ejected from the skimmer, tumbling through the air behind them. Shield your eyes. Seconds later, the desert lit up with a blinding flash. The electromagnetic pulse from the modified charge momentarily disabled all electronic systems in its radius, including their own skimmer, which lurched sickeningly before the backup systems engaged. Behind them, the pursuit vehicles weren't so fortunate. Without the modifications Ethan had installed, their systems failed completely. One crashed immediately into the desert floor, exploding on impact. The other spiraled out of control, eventually disappearing beyond a distant dune. That won't stop the hunters for long, Lyra cautioned, as Ethan guided their damaged skimmer toward the entrance to the canyons. They'll have survival protocols. It doesn't need to stop them forever, Ethan replied, his focus entirely on the approaching canyon walls. Just long enough for us to disappear. They entered the whispering canyons at dangerous speed, the skimmer barely clearing the narrow gap between towering rock formations. Inside, the sunlight dimmed as the canyon walls rose hundreds of meters above them, casting long shadows across their path. The wind funneled through the natural corridor howled with an almost human quality, giving the canyons their ominous name. Mira, Ethan called over the noise. Now would be a good time for those ancient ones to start guiding us. The youngest sister had gone into an almost trance-like state, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light of the skimmer's cabin. Left at the fork, she whispered. Then down into the shadow path. Ethan followed her directions, navigating the increasingly complex network of canyons. Each turn brought new challenges, narrow passages barely wide enough for their vehicle's sudden drops, that required all his piloting skills to negotiate blinding walls of swirling sand that reduced visibility to zero. The engines are overheating, Celine reported, monitoring the skimmer's deteriorating systems. We can't maintain this pace much longer. We don't need to, Mira said, suddenly pointing ahead. There, the hidden entrance. Ethan strained to see what she was indicating. At first it appeared to be just another rock wall, but as they approached, he noticed a narrow fissure partially concealed by wind-sculpted stone formations. That's not wide enough, he protested. It is, Mira insisted. Trust me. With no better options, Ethan aimed the skimmer toward the fissure, reducing speed as much as he dared. The canyon walls seemed to close in around them, stone scraping against the skimmer's already damaged hull. Warning alarms blared as exterior sensors were sheared off. For a moment it seemed they would become permanently wedged in the narrow passage. Then suddenly, they broke through into open space. Ethan fought to control their trajectory as the skimmer emerged into a massive cavern. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the distant ceiling, illuminating an underground lake that glittered like polished obsidian. Surrounding the lake were structures clearly artificial, clearly ancient, built directly into the cavern walls. The Temple of the Dark Star. Mira breathed awe evident in her voice. It's real. With the last of their power, Ethan guided the skimmer to a relatively flat area near the lake's edge. The engines gave one final whine of protest before shutting down completely, plunging the cabin into silence. For a long moment, no one spoke, each processing the reality of their situation. They had escaped for now, but they were stranded in an underground cavern with limited supplies, a damaged vehicle, and hunters likely still in pursuit. Well, Ethan finally said, releasing his white-knuckled grip on the controls. That could have gone worse. Lyra snorted. Your definition of worse needs calibration. We're alive, Ethan pointed out. And we found your ancient temple. I'd call that a qualified success. He unstrapped himself and moved to the rear of the skimmer to assess their supplies. The sisters followed Mira, still somewhat dazed from her prolonged psychic efforts. We have water purifiers, so the lake solves our most immediate concern, Ethan observed, organizing their limited resources. Emergency rations for maybe 3 days. Basic medical supplies. Tools that might help us repair some of the skimmer's systems, but not the main engine that's completely fried. The hunters will find us eventually, Lyra stated, ever the tactical realist. Even with Mira's interference, they're designed to track their targets across any terrain. Perhaps not here, Celine suggested, examining their surroundings with keen interest. These structures contain unusual mineral compositions. I'm detecting significant electromagnetic anomalies consistent with what I've read about the ancient ruins. The Dark Star's energy flows through this place, Mira confirmed, seeming to regain her strength now that they were inside the cavern. It disrupts technology clouds' minds. The hunters will struggle to function here. Good to know, Ethan said, not entirely convinced, but willing to accept any advantage. Still, we should establish defensive positions just in case. Lyra, can you scout the perimeter, identify potential entry points, and defensible locations? The eldest sister nodded, apparently approving of Ethan's strategic thinking. She selected a weapon from their limited arsenal and moved off to examine the cavern's boundaries. Celine, see if you can salvage anything useful from the skimmer's communication systems. If we could send a signal to a passing ship. Unlikely, Celine replied, already accessing the skimmer's damaged computer. But I'll see what can be recovered. What about me? Mira asked, bouncing slightly on her toes despite their dire situation. Ethan considered the young Zarianite thoughtfully. You said this was the Temple of the Dark Star. If anyone knows these ruins, it's you. See what you can learn, any hidden passages, resources, information about this place that might help us. Mira grinned, clearly pleased with her assignment. I'll commune with the Ancient Ones. They'll tell me their secrets. She skipped off toward the nearest structure, her earlier fatigue seemingly forgotten. Left alone, Ethan took a moment to truly absorb their situation. In less than 24 hours, his carefully constructed life of anonymity had been completely destroyed. He was now stranded in an ancient ruin with 3 alien princesses, hunted by some of the most dangerous assassins in the galaxy, with limited supplies and a disabled vehicle. And somehow, he had assumed the role of protector and leader, a role he had sworn never to take on again after what happened at Centauri 4. The irony wasn't lost on him. 4 years of hiding, of suppressing his training and instincts, of being nothing more than a station engineer, all undone, because he'd accepted a drink from a drunk alien commander. Ethan sighed and began establishing their camp. Whatever the future held, they needed to survive the present first. And despite every logical argument against it, he found himself surprisingly committed to ensuring these 3 strange females remained safe. Whether it was the binding contract, his long-dormant sense of duty, or something else entirely, he couldn't say. All he knew was that for the first time in 4 years, he was thinking like an operative again. And somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of carefully constructed anonymity, a part of him welcomed the return. The first 3 days in the temple passed in a blur of activity. Ethan established a secure base camp near the skimmer, using salvaged materials to create basic shelters. Lyra set up defensive perimeters, placing improvised alarms at potential entry points. Celine worked tirelessly on the skimmer's systems, managing to restore limited power for lighting and environmental control, if not propulsion. And Mira explored the ancient structures, returning periodically with fascinating, if sometimes cryptic, information about the temple's history and purpose. By the 4th day, they had settled into an uneasy routine. Ethan was preparing the morning meal, rehydrated protein packs, supplemented with edible fungi Mira had discovered growing near the underground lake, when Celine approached, her expression troubled. "We need to talk," she said quietly, glancing to ensure Lyra and Mira were out of earshot. "I've been analyzing the temple's layout based on Mira's discoveries and my own observations. This isn't just a religious site. It's a facility of some kind." Ethan passed her a portion of the unappetizing but nutritious breakfast. "What kind of facility?" "I believe it was built to harness the energy of the Dark Star during its alignment with Iridia's moons," Celine explained, accepting the food but not eating. The structures are positioned to channel and focus that energy. Energy for what purpose? Ethan asked, his instincts alerting him to the concern behind Celine's normally controlled demeanor. That's unclear, she admitted. But based on the symbols Mira has translated, and the architecture itself, it appears to be a weapon of some kind. Or at least it could be used as one. Ethan set down his own meal appetite, suddenly diminished. And you think that's why the Tech Consortium is hunting you to use this weapon? Possibly. Celine's violet eyes met his directly. But I'm more concerned about what happens when the alignment occurs. Mira says it's only 3 months away, and her connection to this place grows stronger every day. I fear she may be changing. Before Ethan could respond, Lyra returned from her morning patrol, her expression grim. We have company, she announced without preamble. Footprints at the western access point, fresh. They've found us. Ethan was on his feet instantly. How many? Just one set of tracks so far, Lyra replied. Scout, most likely. Assessing our position before the main force arrives. Did you see anyone? Lyra shook her head. Just the tracks, but their Tech Consortium designed distinctive tread pattern, precise depth. A hunter. Where's Mira? Ethan asked, suddenly alert to her absence. She said she was going to the inner chamber to listen to the whispers, Celine answered. She's been spending most of her time there lately. Ethan made a quick decision. Lyra, get Mira and bring her back to camp. We need to prepare for evacuation. Evacuation to where? Lyra challenged. The skimmer is still inoperable and there's only one way out of this cavern. Actually, Celine interjected, that's not entirely accurate. My analysis of the temple's structure suggests the existence of tunnels beneath the main chamber, possibly an extensive network connecting to other caverns, or even to the surface. And you didn't mention this earlier because, Ethan asked, trying to keep the frustration from his voice. Because I only confirmed it last night, Celine replied evenly. And because accessing these tunnels may require special means. What kind of special means? Lyra demanded. Celine hesitated. The kind only Mira might provide. The entrances appear to be sealed with mechanisms that respond to specific mental patterns. Patterns similar to what Mira experiences during her communions with the Ancient Ones. Ethan cursed under his breath. Get her back here now, and pack only what we absolutely need. If the hunters have found us, we can't afford to wait. Lyra nodded and moved swiftly toward the inner chamber, where Mira spent most of her time. Ethan turned to Celine. How confident are you about these tunnels? 87% certain they exist, she replied promptly. 62% confident they provide a viable escape route. 45% sure we can access them without triggering temple defense systems. Temple defenses, Ethan raised an eyebrow. That's the first you've mentioned those. I was hoping to gather more data before concerning you, Celine admitted. But yes, there are indications that this facility had sophisticated security measures. Whether they're still functional after thousands of years is unknown. Ethan began gathering their essential supplies, weapons, water purifiers, emergency rations, medical kits. Any idea what kind of defenses we might be facing? Based on symbols in the outer chamber, primarily energy-based barriers, and some form of automated sentinels. But that's largely speculation. Their conversation was interrupted by Lyra's return alone, and clearly agitated. Mira's gone, she reported tensely. She's not in the inner chamber or any of her usual exploration sites. Could she have found the tunnels on her own? Ethan asked Celine. Possibly, Celine conceded. She's been increasingly attuned to the temple's energies. She might have sensed pathways we couldn't detect. Or she could have been taken, Lyra stated bluntly. The hunter could have bypassed my perimeter and captured her. Ethan considered both possibilities, neither of which was reassuring. We need to find her immediately. Lyra checked the western access point again. Look for any sign that the hunter entered the cavern or left with Mira. Celine, go to the inner chamber and see if you can find any indication of where she might have gone. And you? Lyra asked. I'm going to prepare for the worst, Ethan replied grimly. If we have to fight our way out of here, I want to be ready. The sisters departed on their assigned tasks, while Ethan finished packing their supplies. He then moved to the skimmer, accessing a hidden compartment beneath the pilot's seat that even the sisters didn't know about. Inside was a small case containing his most closely guarded possession, a neural interface enhancer that multiplied the capabilities of the basic interface he'd kept hidden in his pillow. Standard neural interfaces allowed limited psychic interaction with electronic systems. The enhancer, however, was military-grade technology illegal in most civilized systems. With it, Ethan could not only access electronic systems, but manipulate them on a fundamental level, rewriting code, redirecting energy flows, even creating destructive feedback loops that could disable entire networks. It was the technology that had made him such an effective operative during the war. It was also what had led to the disaster at Centauri 4, a memory he had spent 4 years trying to forget. Ethan hesitated, the case open before him. Using the enhancer meant returning to the person he had been, the person who had made decisions that cost thousands of lives. But if the hunters had Mira, or if more were on the way, his decision was made for him when a scream echoed through the cavern, Celine's voice filled with pain and fear. Ethan snapped the neural interface enhancer into place at the base of his skull, wincing as it connected with his nervous system. Instantly, his awareness expanded, electronic signals becoming visible to his mind's eye, like glowing webs of light. He could sense the damaged systems of the skimmer, the ancient but still active technology embedded in the temple walls, and something else, something new and threatening moving through the cavern. Grabbing his weapons, Ethan ran toward the inner chamber where Celine had gone. As he approached, he saw her sprawled on the ground, a dart protruding from her neck. Standing over her was a figure in sleek black armor, featureless except for a red visor that glowed ominously in the dim light. The hunter. Without hesitation, Ethan activated his neural interface, reaching out to the hunter's systems. To his shock, he encountered not the expected resistance of neural dampening fields, but something far more sinister, a hybrid consciousness part, organic part machine, that reacted to his intrusion with savage countermeasures. Pain lanced through Ethan's mind as the hunter's defensive algorithms attacked his neural pathways. He staggered, nearly dropping his weapon. This was technology far beyond what he had faced during the war, adaptive, aggressive, almost alive in its response. The hunter turned toward him, raising a weapon that hummed with deadly energy. Ethan managed to dive behind a stone column as the weapon discharged the blast, taking a chunk out of the ancient stone where he had stood moments before. Ethan Blake, the hunter, spoke, its voice an unsettling blend of organic and synthetic tones. Neural Operative ID 37291B. Designation Mindshaper. Status Rogue. They knew who he was. Somehow they had identified him despite 4 years of careful anonymity. The Zarianite females are property of the Tech Consortium. The hunter continued moving methodically around the column, seeking a clear shot. Surrender them, and you may be granted leniency for your past crimes. "Where's Mira?" Ethan called, trying to buy time as he reassessed his neural approach. Direct confrontation had failed, but perhaps a more subtle intrusion. "The youngest is secure," the hunter replied. "Her abilities make her particularly valuable to our research. The others are expendable." That confirmed Ethan's fears. They had Mira. And from the hunter's casual dismissal of Lyra and Celine, they weren't interested in keeping the other sisters alive. Where was Lyra? She should have heard the commotion by now. Had there been more than one hunter? Had she been captured or killed as well? Ethan needed to act quickly. Using his neural interface, he reached out again, not toward the hunter's systems this time, but to the ancient technology embedded in the temple walls. If Celine was right about this place being a weapon facility, perhaps some of those defense systems were still operational. To his surprise, the ancient technology responded readily to his probe, almost eagerly, as if it had been waiting for someone with his abilities to activate it. Symbols illuminated along the chamber walls, The same symbols Mira had been studying now, glowing with inner light. The hunter noticed the change immediately. "What have you done?" it demanded momentarily, distracted from its pursuit of Ethan. Ethan wasn't entirely sure himself. He had intended to trigger security measures against the hunter, but instead, the entire chamber had come alive with pulsing energy. The floor began to vibrate subtly beneath his feet. Using the hunter's momentary confusion, Ethan emerged from cover and fired his weapon. The energy blast struck the hunter's shoulder, causing it to stagger, but not fall. Before it could recover, Ethan fired again, aiming for the red visor. This time, the hunter was ready, deflecting the blast with some kind of energy shield that materialized around its armor. "Primitive tactics," the hunter said dismissively. "Your neural abilities are the only reason you were ever effective Mindshaper. Without them, you are nothing." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," came a new voice from the chamber entrance. Lyra stood there, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, but very much alive, and armed with what appeared to be an ancient weapon taken from the temple walls. The hunter turned, slightly, calculating the new threat. That split second of divided attention was all Ethan needed. Through his neural interface, he sent a surge of energy into the ancient systems around them, not trying to control them, but simply overloading them with input. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Energy discharges erupted from the glowing symbols on the walls, arcing through the air toward the hunter. Its shields flared brilliantly as they tried to repel the attack, but the ancient energy was too powerful, too alien for its defenses to counter effectively. With a sound like shattering glass, the hunter's shields failed. Energy poured into its armor, causing systems to short-circuit and explode. The hunter convulsed, caught in a web of crackling force, before finally collapsing to the ground, armor smoking and visor dark. Ethan rushed to Celine's side, checking her pulse. It was steady. The dart appeared to be a tranquilizer, rather than a lethal toxin. He carefully removed it from her neck and applied a medical patch from his belt pouch. "Will she live?" Lyra asked, approaching cautiously, her stolen weapon, still trained on the fallen hunter. "I think so," Ethan replied. "But we need to get that analyzed to be sure." He indicated the dart he'd removed. "What happened to you? I thought they might have gotten you too." "There was a second hunter at the western access," Lyra explained, touching her bloodied forehead. "I was careless, but I managed to eliminate it." Her voice held no boast, just a simple statement of fact. "When I heard the commotion here, I came as quickly as I could." Ethan nodded, impressed despite himself with Lyra's combat abilities. "They have Mira." "I know," Lyra replied grimly. "I found signs of her capture at the access point. She must have wandered too close to their position, or been drawn there deliberately." Ethan suggested remembering what Celine had said about Mira's changing connection to the temple. "Either way, we need to find her quickly." Celine stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Ethan, what?" "Easy," he said, helping her sit up slowly. "You were hit with a tranquilizer. How do you feel?" "Disoriented. My neural pathways are clouded." She blinked, trying to focus. "The hunter." "Neutralized," Lyra assured her, gesturing to the smoking form on the chamber floor. Celine's gaze shifted to the glowing symbols on the walls, then to the neural interface now visible at the base of Ethan's skull. Her eyes widened slightly in understanding. "You activated the temple systems," she observed. "That was extremely dangerous. We don't fully understand this technology." "It was that, or let the hunter kill us," Ethan replied, helping her to her feet. "Besides, it responded to my interface more readily than I expected. Almost like it was designed for someone with my abilities." Celine steadied herself against a column, her analytical mind already working, despite the lingering effects of the tranquilizer. "The ancient texts Mira translated speak of thought shapers, who could command the temple's energies. Perhaps your neural technology mimics abilities the temple builders possessed naturally." "Fascinating discussion," Lyra interrupted impatiently. "But Mira is still missing, and where there are two hunters, more will follow. We need to move." Agreed, Ethan said. Celine, you mentioned tunnels beneath the temple. Can you lead us to them? Celine nodded tentatively. I believe so. The primary access should be in the deepest part of the inner chamber. They moved further into the temple, leaving the fallen hunter behind. Ethan maintained his neural connection to the ancient systems, both to light their way, via the glowing symbols, and to provide early warning of any additional threats. Lyra took point her stolen weapon ready, while Celine directed them through increasingly narrow and complex passages. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a dead end, a solid wall inscribed with elaborate symbols, surrounding a central, circular design. This is it, Celine confirmed. According to my analysis, this should be the entrance to the tunnel network. Ethan examined the wall through both his physical senses and his neural interface. There's definitely something behind here. I can sense active systems, but they're waiting for something. A key of some kind, Celine suggested. Possibly a specific mental pattern, as I theorized earlier. Mira seemed to be developing a connection that might have activated it. Which would explain why the tech consortium wanted her specifically, Lyra added. If they knew about these tunnels and their importance. Can you bypass it? She asked Ethan, nodding toward his neural interface. Ethan studied the circular design, reaching out cautiously with his enhanced senses. Maybe. It's not like any lock I've encountered before, but there are access points for mental patterns. If I can simulate the correct sequence. He focused his concentration, allowing his mind to merge more deeply with the ancient technology. At first, there was resistance patterns too alien for his human mind to easily comprehend. But then, drawing on his years of training as a neural operative, he began to adapt to find commonalities between his thought patterns and those the system was expecting. The circular design began to glow faintly at first, then, with increasing brightness. Symbols around it activated in sequence, responding to Ethan's mental probes. He felt a strange resonance building, as if the system were not just accepting his input, but amplifying it somehow. It's working, Celine observed, her voice hushed with wonder. The wall before them shimmered, becoming translucent, then transparent, revealing a passage beyond. But as Ethan maintained the connection, something unexpected happened. Images flashed through his mind, not his own memories, but visions of the temple, as it had been thousands of years ago, filled with beings of light, who wielded energies similar to what his neural interface allowed him to manipulate. And with these visions came knowledge, understanding of the temple's true purpose, of the dark star's significance, and of why the three Xerionite sisters were so important to both. Ethan gasped, nearly breaking the connection, as the flood of information threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. But he held on, stabilizing the link as the wall fully dematerialized, leaving the tunnel entrance open before them. Ethan. Celine's concerned voice brought him back to the present. Are you all right? Your neural responses are highly elevated. I saw things, he managed, his voice unsteady. The temple builders, the dark star. And I understand now why the tech consortium wants Mira, wants all of you. Tell us as we move, Lyra instructed, already stepping through the newly revealed entrance. If these tunnels can lead us to Mira, we can't waste time. Ethan nodded, following her into the tunnel with Celine close behind. The passage was smooth-walled and sloped gently downward, illuminated by the same soft glow that had activated in the chamber above. As they descended, Ethan shared what he had learned. The temple was built by a species that evolved natural neural abilities, far beyond what our technology can mimic, he explained. They discovered that during the dark star's alignment, its unique radiation amplified their powers exponentially. They built this facility to harness that energy, to channel it for various purposes, some benevolent, some not. And how do we fit into this? Celine asked. Your species, Xerionites, are distant descendants of the temple builders, Ethan revealed. Genetically altered to survive in different environments, but retaining fragments of their abilities. Lyra's combat instincts, your analytical mind, Mira's connection to the ancient ones, They're all expressions of those inherited traits. That's impossible, Lyra objected. Zerionite history is well documented. We evolved on Zeria Prime, not Iridia. Your recorded history only goes back so far, Ethan countered. The temple builders lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. When their civilization fell, I couldn't see exactly why some fled to other worlds, including what would become Zeria Prime. Over time, they evolved into modern Zerionites, largely losing their connection to their ancestors' abilities. Except during the Dark Star alignment, Celine deduced, her quick mind connecting the pieces. When the same radiation that empowered the temple builders affects their descendants, us. Exactly, Ethan confirmed. And that's why the Tech Consortium wants you. They've discovered this connection, and they believe they can use you, especially Mira, who has the strongest link to the ancient abilities to harness the Dark Star's power when the alignment occurs. For what purpose? Lyra demanded. Ethan's expression darkened. Weaponization. They want to create neural operatives with abilities far beyond what even the most advanced technology currently allows. An army of psychic soldiers who could manipulate any electronic system, control any technology. They could dominate the entire galaxy. The implications hung heavily in the air as they continued through the tunnel. After several minutes of silent processing, Celine spoke. This explains Mira's growing connection to this place. As the alignment approaches her, inherited abilities are strengthening, resonating with the temple's systems, and making her the perfect conduit for the Tech Consortium's experiments, Lyra added grimly. We need to find her before they can exploit that connection. The tunnel branched before them, splitting into 3 separate passages. Ethan paused, reaching out with his neural interface to sense which path might lead them toward the surface, and hopefully toward Mira. To his surprise, he detected a familiar pattern, the unique mental signature that he'd come to associate with Mira during their days in the temple. It was faint, but distinct, coming from the rightmost tunnel. This way, he said confidently. I can sense her. Lyra gave him a questioning look. You can track her mentally now. The temple systems have enhanced my interface, Ethan explained. I've been around Mira enough to recognize her neural patterns. She's alive, but... He frowned, concentrating harder. Something's wrong. Her patterns are erratic, distressed. They're hurting her. Lyra's voice hardened with cold fury. Not physically, I think, Ethan clarified. But they're doing something to her mind. We need to hurry. They increased their pace, jogging through the tunnel that gradually sloped upward toward the surface. After what seemed like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, they began to see natural light filtering down from above. The tunnel ended at a series of rough-hewn steps, leading up to what appeared to be a camouflaged exit among desert rocks. Ethan signaled for caution as they approached the exit. Using his neural interface, he scanned for electronic signatures that might indicate more hunters or other Tech Consortium forces. What he found was concerning. There's a temporary base established about 200 meters from this exit, he reported in a hushed voice. Advanced systems heavily shielded. At least 5 hunters present, plus other personnel. And something else. He frowned, concentrating. A massive energy signature, artificial, but somehow interfacing with the temple's technology. That must be where they're holding Mira. Can you tell how many enemies total? Lyra asked, checking her weapon. At least 15, maybe more, Ethan replied. Too many for a direct assault. Then we need a strategic approach, Celine said. Perhaps we could use the temple systems to create a distraction. Ethan considered this. Possibly. My connection to the temple is stronger here than I expected. The tunnels must extend throughout the area, creating a network I can access. He closed his eyes, concentrating on expanding his neural awareness. There are auxiliary systems near their base that I might be able to activate. What kind of systems? Lyra pressed. Defensive measures similar to what we used against the hunter in the chamber. Energy discharges, possibly more. Ethan opened his eyes. I can trigger them remotely, create chaos in their camp. During the confusion, we infiltrate, locate Mira, and extract her.